building a better Bay Area, moving forward, finding solutions. This is ABC7 News.
Hi there, I'm Kristen Z. You're watching Getting Answers live on ABC7. We ask experts your questions every day at 3 to get answers for you in real time. Today, we'll be looking ahead to the next generation COVID booster shots that are coming as soon as next month. UCSF's Dr. Peter Chin-Hong will explain how this new formulation will impact people who have already had COVID, who is eligible, and whether you will need it. But first, big changes are coming for millions of Americans carrying the burdens of student loans. President Biden announced his long-promised, highly anticipated, and highly debated student loan forgiveness plan today. The key components: if you get Pell Grants, you can be forgiven up to $20,000. If you don't have Pell Grants and only have loans, you can be forgiven up to $10,000. And you're only eligible for forgiveness if you make $125,000 or less. Lastly, loan repayment is capped at 5% of your monthly income.
People can finally crawl out from under that mountain of debt, to get on top of their rent and their utilities, to finally think about buying a home or starting a family or starting a business.
Joining us live now to talk about the plan, its cost to the government and taxpayers, and its impact on the economy, Professor of Business Economics and Public Policy at the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, Professor Kent Smetters.
Good to be here. Thanks.
Professor Smetters, you're also faculty director of the Penn-Wharton Budget Model. That is a nonpartisan research initiative that provides economic and fiscal analysis of public policy. So you did a detailed report on Biden's student loan debt plan based on different options he could have gone with. And now that he has chosen and we have the details, tell us, what is the expected cost to the government?
So we're still calculating the new updates that he just released today. What we previously calculated was that it's simply forgiving $10,000 of debt for households making $125,000 or less. If they're married, that is doubled to $250,000, but that would cost between $300 and $330 billion over 10 years, depending if the government keeps this program kind of ongoing. By also now doubling the amount for Pell Grant recipients from $10,000 to $20,000, that will increase the price tag. We're still calculating that since we've only got those details a few hours ago, but we are looking more closer to above $500 billion in that case.
Okay. Of course, it depends on how many people have Pell Grants and how many people are going to apply for the program, right? But what is the average debt, just so we have an idea, carried by an American college graduate?
The average debt is higher than this amount. The distribution of that debt by income matters a lot as well. The average debt is over $30,000, conditional on being a college graduate. And so it is no question that this will have a big impact on people, how much people owe.
Yeah, I mean, look, during the political process and the debate about this, some people wanted more, saying 50,000 is what's going to make a dent. Others on the right say, no, you're going to add to the inflation pressures. Plus, it's not fair to people who had to save money and pay back their debt. I'm not going to ask you to get into the politics right now, but I wonder, based on the numbers you're looking at, does the forgiveness, the money that is coming out of the government coffers, is most of that actually going to the people who need it most, like people on the very bottom rungs of the economic ladder? And will this make an impactful difference for them?
Sure. And if you go from 10,000 to 50,000, that increases the price tag from that $330 billion to close to $1 trillion over 10 years. In terms of who benefits from this, we're rerunning numbers based on the newest change in terms of the Pell Grant recipients who get double the amount of forgiveness, as well as some of the income-based replacement changes that they're making. But what we found is that for a simple debt forgiveness of up to $10,000, for those making less than 125,000. About 70% of that benefits more in the top 60% income. That is another way of saying it. 30% of the benefit is going to those in the bottom 40% of the income distribution, and in the bottom 20% of the income distribution, sometimes called the kind of poor households, about 10% of the benefit is going to them.
All right. That's interesting and important to keep in mind. Can you just quickly, very quickly, explain what's the difference between Pell Grants recipients and the non-Pell Grants recipients? I think a lot of viewers, if they're not in the college borrowing game, may not understand that difference.
Sure. So if your household income is low enough, and by household income, this means your parents' income when you're applying for college, you get a grant toward your college bill. And so that is already not a loan. It's already free money in some sense that's being paid to the college to reduce your tuition bill. But they're essentially using that as a trigger. That is, they're using that as a mechanism to identify those who may be lower income, and therefore they're going to get twice the amount of forgiveness. Now, it is mixing up income concepts a little bit because, you know, the children of parents of low-income parents are not necessarily themselves low income. And so, but nonetheless, it is an attempt to try to create more redistribution. And that what we will show very soon, within a day or two, is that, first of all, the price tag will go up quite a bit relative to what we previously estimated with this additional Pell Grant, as well as income-based replacement. At the same time, the program will become more progressive. It's not going to be as progressive as targeted programs to low income, like the Earned Income Tax Credit, but it's not going to be, you will see the lowest 40% will get more than 30% of the benefit.
It sounds like we have to do a follow-up when your calculations are complete. But you were talking about the price tag, right, now being over probably $500 billion. But is some of that offset by the fact that maybe people won't be defaulting on their loans then if they're being forgiven?
Yes, that is true. And we take a lot of things into account when we do this. In particular, one of the interesting things is that there already are existing income-based repayment programs. And a lot of people qualify and they just don't utilize those programs. Part of it is just the enormous complexity. There's multiple of these programs. Some of this is just the lack of information. People don't understand that you're not really locked in when you start this program. And so there's a lot of confusion about why do people even not take advantage of existing programs. So we take all of that into account. Some of those programs will actually save a little bit of money. There will be offsets by the fact that some of the debt will be forgiven. And then the issue about defaults, yes, we take that into account in the sense that if that money otherwise would have, essentially the government would have paid it anyway. We want to account for that as well.
Right. Look, Republicans and also just critics of loan forgiveness say this will drive up inflation, which is already at a 40-year high. Explain, for those of us who need a refresher on our Econ 101, what is behind that argument and how true that is and how big that impact is.
Yeah. So the theory behind it is that as people feel richer because now some of their debt has been forgiven, they're going to go out and spend more. That's the so-called demand side effect. And as they spend more, prices are going to get bid up just because you have more people chasing the same amount of goods and services, at least throughout the end of the year. In reality, at least for the more modest package of just forgiving up to $10,000 without this additional Pell Grant kind of kicker that's happening, the impact on inflation would have been pretty small. And the reason why is that most of what people are going to get for that $10,000 is not a check in the mail for $10,000. It's a reduction in their debt. And so their monthly payments would go down. So if you owed $50,000 in debt and you got $10,000 forgiven, then your monthly payment would go down by $20,000. And that is not the same thing as just getting a check in the mail today. These things are amortized over many years. And so we think the inflationary impact is not really the big picture here. In particular, if you're going from 8.5%, 9% inflation, trying to get back down to 2%, the impact there, maybe 0.1% of that, it's really quite small.
All right, well, that is a relief to hear. Look, we only have less than a minute left, but I want to ask you, the president in his announcement today, and we ran that at the top of the segment, he said education is the ticket to a better life. But is higher education simply too expensive in the U.S.? I mean, this loan debt forgiveness is just a small piece of it. A lot of people come out with, much higher debt. In terms of looking at the world, how much are we Americans spending on our higher education, and is there something that can be done?
Yeah, it's a great question, but there's a couple things. One is he's right in some sense. I grew up in a low-income family. I call education the big life's reset button. It's your second chance, and there's no question there's a lot of value to it. At the same time, there's also evidence that a lot of the existing grants and other subsidies, colleges essentially capture a lot of that benefit in the form of their pricing. And so it doesn't all accrue to students, especially if the program is ongoing and it's not just truly a one-time program. But in terms of, education, the fact of the matter is the reason why the United States is such a magnet across the world is because we do have really stellar education, college level, university level programs. And so it's one of those things, though, that we pay a pretty high price for it. And part of that will, in fact, potentially change if the government can, with these government subsidies.
Well, Wharton is certainly one of the awesome programs. And thank you for just giving us a free class, tuition free.
My pleasure. Great talking with you.
Professor Kent Smetters, thank you very much. Appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Coming up next, a new COVID booster is coming soon, but should you get it? And what if you've already had COVID? The doctor is in the house to answer all those questions and more. Coming up on Getting Answers. All righty, be right back. First Lady Joe Biden is the latest high-profile COVID rebound case. Her office announcing she's tested positive again after being negative for days. And there are new details on the next generation booster that covers Omicron. Sources say it'll roll out sooner than expected, but who will be eligible and who really needs it? Joining us live to talk about these issues and answer your questions that you can ask now on Facebook Live. I am watching your questions. UCSF infectious diseases expert, Dr. Peter Chin-Hong. Dr. Chin-Hong, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, Kristen. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, no, big news day. First Lady Joe Biden tested positive again and is going back into isolation. Didn't she test negative 2 consecutive days in a row? How common is this?
Yeah, so we're trying to call it COVID rebound now instead of Paxlovid rebound because you can see this phenomenon with COVID. It's just that we're not really hiding to look at it in people who have COVID. It's, when you look at the trials, it's about 1 to 2%, both in the Paxlovid group as well as in the placebo group. But more recent studies show that it's higher, maybe in the order of 10 to 20%. But it seems that everybody is getting it, but that's not the truth when you look at the studies. And it's still doing a whole lot of good.
All right. And of course, the same thing happened to President Biden. And I understand, we shouldn't maybe just call it Paxlovid rebound. But given that it can make you recover a little more quickly and you're not fully over it and then you're contending with it still, does this change who you think should be taking Paxlovid at this point?
Yes, definitely. So I think that the absolute group that should be taking Paxlovid is those who are unvaccinated, particularly if you're older. The next group would be somebody who's, say, older than 65, or if you have comorbidities, or if you're immune compromised of any age. For a younger person, it may not be in the cards simply because there would be a chance that you would have recurrence of symptoms, even though those symptoms are milder. It doesn't send you to the hospital. It's still a drag if you have to reset the clock for isolation.
For sure. And First Lady Jill Biden's spokespeople say she's seeing no symptoms at all. So it does seem like that falls under the less severe category, less likely to show symptoms. So that is the good news. Dr. Chahal, let's move on to the booster, because several news organizations are citing sources and saying that the FDA will very soon authorize the updated Pfizer and Moderna boosters, maybe right after Labor Day. That's certainly earlier than many of us expected, right? Tell us about these new boosters.
Yeah, so the booster that's slated to be approved in the US soon is version 2.0, which is the original plus BA4, BA5. So it's called a bivalent booster. BA4 and 5 look very similar on the outside, and the ancestral strain. So it's meant to be updated. It's closer to what's circulating now. As people who are listening to this know, BA5 is very dominant. It's more than 90% of cases in the US right now.
Wow.
And seems to be holding out on its own.
Okay, so what's the eligibility and age for the Pfizer and the Moderna?
Yeah, so it's slated to be everyone over the age of 12 would be eligible for this new and improved booster. I think the government has bought 105 million doses of the new and improved Pfizer and about 86 million doses of the Moderna. Pfizer submitted paperwork on Monday. Moderna submitted paperwork on Tuesday.
Okay, so if you're age eligible, are you able to get it if you only recently got the old booster, the original version? Like, let's say you got it over the summer for your travels, which a lot of people did.
Yeah, so I think everyone will be eligible regardless of when you got the booster.
Like you don't have to wait for 4 months?
We haven't seen those guidelines yet. I think you may not get the bang for your buck by getting it immediately if you just got it, say, a week before it's approved. And some people are being strategic again, because if you think right now we're kind of quiet on the COVID landscape, we may get a surge, most people are thinking, in late fall, December. So it may be that people might time it like they timed the flu shot. Because if you think the flu is most predominant in January and February, some people wait to around Thanksgiving or sometime in late October to get that flu shot.
I was just going to ask you about the flu shot because, some people like to kind of space them out and not get the COVID and the flu shot at around the same time. So given what we know about this new round of boosters, what do you think is ideal for the two shots?
I think it's best to get the new and updated booster first, the bivalent booster, because that will likely surge before flu usually peaks. But we don't know, flu might peak a little bit earlier this year because we haven't had it for the last couple of years. We're seeing a lot of activity in Australia, New Zealand, Brazil, and Argentina right now. So we are going to see flu happen with a vengeance this year. I know we cried wolf for the last 2 years, but this is the year.
This is the year. Okay. A new study in the past few days suggested that most people who had the Omicron variant didn't even know they had it. And this means that a lot of us probably have some immunity. Do you think this argues against many people needing the booster?
I mean, I think it's not an emergency for many people. I think the most important thing is that people get the first booster who are eligible. In fact, we know that tens of millions of Americans still haven't gotten that first shot. So instead of hemming and hawing over the second booster, the third booster, the fourth booster, I think making sure most people get that first booster is critical. We're still seeing about 450 people die every day in the United States, which is way too much. It's like 5 to 10 times what a normal flu season looks like.
Yeah, it's still a lot. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these will be the first, the new boosters that are coming out will be the first that after the FDA said, hey, it's okay if we just look at the results from mice studies. We don't have to have the human results. And some people are concerned about that. Are you? Should we be?
No, I'm not concerned because that's what we do every year for flu. We can't wait for a bunch of human studies because you start with the backbone of the same ingredients. It's like making brownies with the different proportion of chocolate and flour and sugar, but it's the same ingredients that you're using. Nothing is really different. And if we waited for human studies for flu, for example, we would never get an annual flu shot.
Got it. I'm sure most of our viewers fully understood that baking analogy. I'm so not the baker, but I think I get what you're saying. Dr. Chen Hong, thank you so much. Join us on Facebook Live right now to answer your questions during the break, and we'll be right back with the doctor. All right, Dr. Chen Hong, we do have some viewer questions here, and now's a good time to tackle those if you don't mind. So Mark Peter de Guzman says, my mom already got her second booster since she's 81 and has medical conditions. As I have autism and 41 years old, should I also get the second booster? Is this the new protein COVID vaccine booster? It wouldn't be right now, but should he get his second booster now, or do you think he should wait?
Well, we are not exactly sure when it will be available. And again, most people think that it will be available in mid-September, even if the FDA approves it in early September. So if you're under 50, regardless of comorbidities, you can wait a little bit longer safely. I think the biggest risk factor for doing poorly in COVID is age, not medical comorbidities. Age is really the driving force. So the mom getting the second booster, great idea, 81 years old. The listener could wait a little bit. I would feel very confident in that.
Okay. Randy wants to know, will Dr. Biden retake Paxlovid for a second time? Do they do that? Do people do that?
We're not really allowed to give it or prescribe it under the current emergency use authorization. So I doubt that she'll take it, particularly since she is not symptomatic. And one would argue that, President Biden and Jill Biden, they're being checked all the time. But in real life, nobody's checking if you have no symptoms.
Oh, right. I mean, her being positive again wouldn't have even been detected under normal circumstances. All right, how much time do we have? 20 seconds. All right, so Daniel, I'll take your question when we come back on air. We have 15 seconds. Water break. Dr. Chen Hong, water break.
10, 9, 8, 7,
All right.
6, 5 seconds, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we are back with UCSF infectious diseases specialist, Dr. Peter Chen Hong, who is answering your questions on Facebook Live during the break. I just want to finish up with Daniel's question here. When would Dr. Chen Hong recommend getting the booster shot if somebody had a mild case in June?
So if you had a mild case in June, I think getting an updated booster shot when it comes out will be a good idea. If you're older than 65, I would say get it 4 months after June at the minimum. So that's kind of where we settle.
Okay. Dr. Chen Hong, I want to move on. I want to look at a new study out of the University of Hawaii that links climate change with the worsening and spreading of diseases such as COVID or monkeypox. How do we know this?
Yeah, so they basically looked at the slope of the graph in the number of new cases for more than 300 infectious diseases that we think we know about, in the world, and they found that more than 60% of them have increased over the last several years. And I think they're linked to a few factors. The first is extremes of temperature. So too hot and too cold makes certain mosquitoes and animals move in different distributions. Too dry and too wet. Too wet flooding, fecal matter, more diarrheal diseases, dry, more dust like cocci and valley fever in the Central Valley. We've seen that increase more than 4 times in the last few decades. So these are some of the factors that people think about but make no mistake about it, we're seeing an increase in more than 60% of infectious diseases in the world.
Wow. And how can we connect the dots here too with monkeypox?
Well, I think if you go back to the roots of what, Mpox is, it's animal disease. And we know that it's linked to small mammals and rodents. And if we think about those animals changing in distribution because of changes in climate, they carry diseases with them, and they may encounter populations where they wouldn't have encountered them before because of this change in distribution.
Oh, okay. And we also saw headlines this week that the Earth's population is nearing 8 billion. Does population growth also contribute to this?
Yes, it does, undoubtedly. When you think about how diseases are spread in the world, it's when people get closer together, human-to-human transmission. COVID is a famous example, of course, but even other things that you don't normally link to people getting together, like HIV, even though that's not directly linked to climate, when people move and they're what we call climate refugees, they have more social issues, they may have more hunger and food insecurity, and that may lead to behaviors that spread HIV. And there are a lot of models and papers showing an increase due to what we call climate refugees.
Look, we only have about 30 seconds, but I'm going to ask you to pack a lot into 30 seconds here. Look, what can we do, right? Because short of, yes, there's an urgent call to try to control climate change, to slow the warming, and, we may want to talk about, and people aren't going to stop having babies. So given that, what can we realistically do to mitigate the disease transmission and spread?
I think we have to be aware, even on the health professional side, when we see dengue, it's not just in Southeast Asia. It could be changing in frequency, even Lyme disease in California. The second thing we can do is just in our own personal lives, try to be a little bit green, listen to those PG&E ads. And then number 3, talk to our lawmakers, our representatives, because collectively we do have a lot of power.
Dr. Chin Hong, thank you so much. Don't go away. A reminder, folks, you can get our live newscast, breaking news, weather, and more with our ABC7 Bay Area streaming TV app. It's available on Apple TV, Android TV, Fire TV, and Roku. Just search ABC7 Bay Area and download it now. Join us on Facebook Live.
In commercial break.
Dr. Chin Hong, I know you have so many patients to see and students to teach, but do you have 2 more minutes?
Yes.
You do. Fantastic. Thank you. Because I do want to get to Pat's concern here, who says he wasn't able to get the second booster due to a heart attack in May. I'm sorry to hear that. Hope you're recovered. Dr. Chin Hong is suggesting to wait for this new booster until later in the fall, but that leaves me really exposed to catching COVID. If I waited till then, I am worried, but I also don't want the new booster to lose its efficacy too soon in the winter. Advice?
Yeah, so I mean, the general advice is if you're eligible for that second booster, go ahead and get it. There's so many uncertainties still. We don't know who in the population get it. Maybe it's going to be prioritized for those over 65. And you do get benefit from the current vaccine formula. It's spectacular at preventing you from going to the hospital. And it tops off your antibodies at least in the 4 to 6 weeks after you get it. So if you're eligible, go ahead and get it.
All righty, there you go. John has a question. How long should I wait to get monkeypox vaccine after COVID booster?
You don't need to wait too long. You can get it the same day, really. But the Mpox vaccine does make you feel a little bit sore, not like others. So I think spacing them out, if you could, would be good. Maybe a week would be fine enough, actually.
All right, Dr. Chin Hong, thank you so much. Really appreciate you as always. And Daniel says, thank you for all the great info. So thank you for me as well. All right, see you next time.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, everybody, thank you for your great questions. Definitely appreciate your participation today. We'll be back in like 20 seconds.